Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Double Waved Yellows podcast. Today we are looking at the Dutch Grand Prix and all of the events that happened over in Zandvoort. As usual, I am joined by my two co-hosts, Tyson and Hodders. How are you both doing today, guys?
Yep, doing good.
Howdy, hi, all well here.
Excellent stuff. As usual on Double Wave Yellows, we will have a look at the Formula One race. But first of all, we always have a look and give our fair billing to the support races. Hodders is up with the W Series shortly, but first of all, Tyson and Formula 3.
All right, jumping straight into it. So, this weekend we have the sixth and penultimate round of the Formula 3 season in Zandvoort, and the conditions couldn't be any different from last weekend at Spa. Not a raindrop to be seen anywhere. Dennis Hauger came into the weekend still leading the championship, but with his advantage cut significantly last time out. Fortunately, he was able to put it on pole position in qualifying, which set him up nicely for Sunday's feature race to mitigate the damage done at Spa. Hauger's main rival and championship contender, Jack Doohan, qualified fourth, leaving him with a little bit of work to do if he's to stay in championship contention. And as always, the remaining top 12 line up in reverse qualifying order for race 1, which meant Amaury Cordial, who qualified 12th, was the pole sitter for race 1. Speaking of, this was a milestone event for Formula 3, race 50 of the new era since the 2019 rebrand. But Cordial, unfortunately, wasn't able to make anything from the pole start. Arthur Leclerc and Logan Sargent swept past him effortlessly at the first corner into first and second, respectively, and then shortly after collided with Alex Smolia, which spun him and dropped him all the way down the order. But Leclerc's early pass turned out to be crucial. He was challenged hard all the way by Sargent, constantly put the pressure on, but Leclerc was able to put on a great defensive display, hung on to the lead. They finished first and second. Ayumu Iwasa, he was waiting patiently in third for an opportunity if anything happened between the two of them, but it just never materialised, and he rounded off the podium. The title rivals, Doohan finished sixth, Hauger finished just behind in seventh, which made things interesting for race 2. Edo Cohen finished 12th in race 1, which started him on pole for race 2, but he was immediately passed by Clement Novalak, who was looking for his first win of the season. He controlled most of the race, but behind him there was action everywhere from the front to the back. And the biggest story of the race for me was Victor Martin, who put on a great offensive showing, started fifth, and just made his way through one at a time to eventually take the lead, and with it his maiden victory in Formula 3. Great battles against Frederick Vesti, Cohen and Novalak as he moved through the order. Well-deserved win, and you could see how much it meant to him as he grabbed the position podium that they drive up to and posed with it. Just great scenes. Just behind him, Novalak finished second, Vesti finished third, but we had drama in the title fight. A scramble after a safety car restart with 2 laps to go saw Hauger, who moved up to third, punctured by Cohen, dropping them both out of contention. Doohan, it looked like he was going to gain some ground back, but then had a moment of his own, just lost it on the final lap and ended up skimming through the gravel. It meant both championship contenders finished out of the points and both lost a golden opportunity to gain an advantage over their rival. Race 3, and it was a much quieter race than the other two. The drivers probably realised the importance of the points at stake. Hauger, he managed to convert his pole position into a dominant victory, finishing 5 seconds ahead of Clement Novalak, who finished second, and Alex Smolia, who finished third. It was looking for the longest time like David Schumacher and Victor Martin would be taking the Romanian podium places, but then Martin, looking to repeat his race 2 performance, just appeared to lose patience, made a rash move that didn't pay off and took them both out of the running. Jack Doohan didn't have the best of starts after a tap from Jack Crawford, but he was able to make his way back up the order. Eventually found a way around Kyle Collett, but he just had to settle for 4th place in the end. So, in the Drivers' Championship, Dennis Hauger's podium finish, it puts him well in the lead now with 193 points. Jack Doohan still scored some solid points for himself, but he has fallen away. Remains in second with 150 points. Clement Novalak's double podium catapults him up into third with 122 points. Victor Martin, Frederick Vesti, both good finishes over the weekend. They're both now on 117 points. Both of them race winners this season, but Martins has a couple more second-place finishes, which just nudges him ahead. Alex Smolia stays in the hunt for third with his third-place finish in the feature race, currently sitting on 107 points. Ollie Caldwell remains seventh with 92 points. Kyle Collett's consistent weekend of a 4th and 2/5 gives him a nice points haul, brings him up into 8th with 87 points. A really good final weekend may secure him that 3rd place spot, who knows. And just behind him, Logan Sargent in 9th with 75, and Arthur Leclerc rounding out the top 10 with 67 points. In the Teams Championship, a very good weekend for Prema, extends their lead to 352 points. Trident also had a good weekend. They remain within striking distance on 327 points. ART remain in 3rd on 233, and MP Motorsport are snapping at their heels for that 3rd place, currently sitting on 204 points. So, 1 round, 3 races to go, and it looks like Tauga has the championship within his grasp. A maximum of 65 points on offer in the final round, and his closest challenger, Jack Doohan, 43 points behind. The battle for 3rd, very tight, with only 5 points separating 3rd from 5th, and the rest of the field behind not that far off either. Literally any of them can take it if they have a good weekend. And speaking of the final round, the news was confirmed last weekend that due to unavoidable logistical changes, Formula 3 is set to swap out next month's season finale at the Circuit of the Americas for a trip to Sochi in 2 weeks alongside Formula 2 at the Russian Grand Prix, which is a little disappointing as Conan is a great track, one of my favourites on the calendar, but we should still get an exciting finale nonetheless. And I'm going to be very busy that weekend with 6 races to cover. But before we get there, the Netherlands was also treated to some W Series action, and I'm going to throw over to Hodders to give us the latest happenings there.
Thank you very much, Tyson. It was a great weekend of racing, an interesting one as well. Abby Pulling making her return as reserve driver at Puma for her 2nd race this season, replacing Caitlin Wood, and Era Sidakova also making a return to the grid, having subsequently tested negative for COVID-19 at the W Series request. So nice swift return there. Now, the practice session went fine. The qualifying session was a slightly interesting one with some timing issues, meaning we didn't see many of the times until towards the end of the session afterwards. But in the end, it was pole position for Emma Kimmerleinen by 74 thousandths of a second over Alice Powell, with Jamie Chadwick in 3rd. Notable that Nerea Marti of the W Academy team was 4th, and the remaining British drivers 5th through 8th, in the order of Pulling, Hawkins, Eaton and Moore. So all 6 British drivers in the top 8. It is worth noting, though, that we had not just 1, but 2 red flags during the qualifying session due to a spin-off for Sabre Cook and also a crash for Fabian Volven. She was all right. The car was relatively all right, although they did both start at the back of the grid. So as the bite-size race began, it was Kimmerleinen in the lead, but only for a few laps as Alice Powell overtook her in the 8th minute, and just a minute later during the race, Jamie Chadwick also overtook Kimmerleinen, and those top 3 stayed as they were. Alice Powell with a victory by nearly 3 seconds over Jamie Chadwick. Emma Kimmerleinen finishing 3rd, Nerea Marti matching her 4th in qualifying with a 4th place finish. Best finish of the season for Jess Hawkins, the British driver, bobble hat of course. 5th place, Abby Eaton in 6th, Abby Pulling with a very, very respectable 7 points. That takes her to 10 points from her 2 reserve races. Sarah Moore down in 9th, and Fabian Volvend, who just can't seem to get any luck at the moment, finishing down in 16th place. One thing that we didn't see on screen, but I'll come to that shortly, is that the podium finishers all got trophies made by 100% recycled materials via Heineken, so recycled bottles for the glass of the bowl, plastic mountings done by recycling plastic beer crates, and waste plywood for the wooden bits as well. So very respectable indeed, and very good green credentials. In terms of the championship standings, it does mean that for the top 2, it's all square. Alice Powell and Jamie Chadwick both on 109 points, although Alice Powell is top by virtue of more podium finishes. Emma Kimmerleinen seems to have 3rd place firmly in her grasp on 75 points. Looking to the team standings in the unofficial, for this year at least, Teams Championship, Racing X now up to 128 points, aided by Jess Hawkins' 5th place finish. Veloce Racing, that's Jamie Chadwick and Bruno Tomaselli on 121, and Ecurie on 94 points, which is the team that Emma Kimmerleinen features in. So very still all to play for in both cases going into the final 2 weeks in the Americas in October, although one talking point I think I'll lead the discussion on here is, and I think Matt's seen this as well, is it does seem that due to delays and stuff the last couple of races, the coverage of the W Series races has been quite poor. And a point I made earlier is that it's quite something as well, even with the highlights on their YouTube channel, is also quite shocking. I looked at for some highlights on the YouTube channel, which is very good, by the way, for the main part. And I found that the highlights video lasted a total of 5 minutes, of which there was 4 minutes of race coverage and no coverage of the standings. It's quite telling when the Off Track magazine show is nearly 3 times as long as the highlights themselves. What say you, chaps?
I completely agree with you that Hodders, it's poor. It's this is a series that is trying to get itself into the public spotlight. Obviously not by forcing it, but trying to make sure that, hey, these are potential drivers that are going to be racing Formula 3, possibly Formula 2, maybe even Formula 1 over the coming years, and it needs to have the right coverage. I've often mentioned when we've watched races, Sky Sports would make a really good go of it in terms of the coverage, but obviously for this sort of series you want it free to air. So hopefully Whisper Media, who do the coverage, same as who also do the Formula 1 coverage on Channel 4, hopefully that they'll take in feedback from the fans and they will hopefully improve on things for next season. Tyson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is just disappointing, really, because it should be getting the jazz. They're putting it on the TV, so they should be giving it the coverage that it deserves, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And looking briefly at the support race weekends that we've had, Tyson, Formula 3, I say 1 weekend to go. You'd think Hauger, in theory, only a catastrophic weekend would stop him from picking up the championship trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. He has one hand on that trophy right now, and as you say, only a catastrophic weekend could really stop him, but anything can happen, as we've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm. And a 43-point gap with how many points is it for a full weekend?
65 points up for grabs.
So essentially, 22 points will gift him the title. Essentially,
Yep.
if my maths serves me correctly. And Hodders, equally an exciting championship. 2 races left, and we have a tie at the top of the championship.
We absolutely do, and I had a feeling it was going to be a close-run thing in general. I mean, if you consider that before the Belgian W Prix, as I call them, you had a group of, even the battle for third was wide open, with only, I think it was 3 or 4 points separating third down to 7th, though Emma Kimline's making a late surge for that 3rd place, and I think she's got it pretty locked up. I could not pick a winner of the championship, and I really wouldn't want to pick between 2 very fine drivers, both of whom could be another Formula soon. Not to mention as well, I should give prominence as well to the younger end as well, when you've got drivers like Nerea Marti and Ira Sidakova finishing amongst the top 5 almost week in, week out. They could be ones to watch.
Mm-hmm. And also worth noting, the 2 drivers who were heavily involved in the incident at Spa were given a clean bill of health prior to this weekend's W Prix.
Yes, that's right. Bijtske-Visser and Ayla Argren, both of the same team, were allowed to race, and they can. Although Bijtske-Visser finished 12th, you can't knock a home Grand Prix.
Absolutely.
Or W Prix, as it were.
Absolutely, and you could see that the Dutch fans were well behind her. Okay, thank you, chaps, for the sports series update, and don't forget, keep coming back here because we will continue to deliver our weekend reports on Formula 2, Formula 3, and the W Series as the season crescendos towards hopefully a dramatic finish. Moving now on to Formula 1, and Max Verstappen confidently wins the Dutch Grand Prix in front of his home fans, the first time in 36 years. Hamilton, Bottas leading behind for Mercedes. Gasly, a superb race weekend, finishing 4th. Leclerc 5th, Alonso 6th, Sainz 7th, Perez 8th. Ocon and Norris rounding out the top 10. So on to our drivers that we are going to have a look at, or we've been keeping an eye on throughout the weekend. And this time we've sort of done it a little bit different in that we've selected our drivers completely at random. And I think some people got lucky and some got unlucky with their selection. So the first driver that I got Max Verstappen. Yep, thanks for that one. Which was just absolutely...
the talk for that one.
Yeah, we all wanted that one. Yeah, Verstappen, just the perfect race weekend. Got pole position off of Lewis Hamilton by just 38 thousandths of a second, and then just controlled the race absolutely superbly to win in front of the Orange Army. With orange flares and lots of fireworks afterwards to celebrate the win. It was a fantastic win for Verstappen, and critically, Hodders gives him back the championship lead.
It absolutely does, and as befitting for anyone in the home Grand Prix race, he didn't really put a foot or indeed a wheel wrong throughout the whole weekend. And the pit crew were right, the strategies were dead on, the racing was spot on, and the win's a win.
Yeah, definitely. And Tyson, this will really give Verstappen momentum now going forward with 9 races to go.
Yep, and that's exactly what he needed after the end of the first half of the season. He just needed that one race that's going to give him that big confidence boost again.
Absolutely. Hodders, the first driver that you picked out of the hat was Valderie Bottas. Tell us about his weekend.
Yeah, I couldn't really complain too much about that one. He qualified in 3rd place, a very good qualifying hour as usual. He was only 3 and 4 tenths respectively behind Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, so he was certainly competitive. During the race, he was one of only 3 drivers to finish on the leading lap, it should be pointed out. He finished P3 and even decided towards the end, despite being boxed, decided to go for the fastest lap against team instructions, which is very, as we put it at the time, to whom it may concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, when we were watching back the highlights, that really was quite messy of Mercedes and how they dealt with that to those pit stops later on for both Bottas and Hamilton.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with how Mercedes handled that, but, Bottas is on his way out. We know this now, so what exactly are they going to do? Fire him?
Yes, absolutely. And for those who didn't see the race, so Bottas pitted late on because he was far enough ahead of Gasly in 4th, basically to create a window so that Hamilton could put on a fresh pair of softs and go for the fastest lap. We didn't agree with it because Hamilton already had a sizable lead over Bottas. Hamilton could have easily have pitted, put on a fresh pair of softs and gone for the fastest lap himself without compromising Bottas. It wasn't pretty seeing Bottas pretty much defy team orders. And Hodders, I'm going to come to you on this. When we've got a Constructors' Championship that is this tight, the last thing you want is the number 2 driver essentially not playing ball.
When every point counts. I mean, you can understand Valtteri's frustration, and I know he's my driver, but it doesn't mean I can't critique it where it's needed. I mean, there is no point arguing the point when every point does count.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Tyson, your first driver out of the hat was the number 2 driver for Red Bull at this time, Sergio Perez. How did Checo do this weekend?
I think disappointing is the first word that springs to mind. He qualified 16th, got caught out when he got stuck in traffic in the pit lane, ended up in the drop zone, and yeah, I just don't know what is going on with Perez this season. He had a really good one last year in 2020, but the curse of the second Red Bull driver seems to have struck again. He did come through the pack to finish 8th, but it really felt like he was struggling. He had that big lock-up against Mick Schumacher, sorry. He really seemed to struggle just to even get past the slower cars on track.
Yeah, I mean, Perez was very unlucky because, yes, he got stuck behind the traffic, and I think he just missed getting over the start-finish line to start his final time lap by about 1 second. And that traffic in Q1 was really, really poor. But a pit lane start after an engine change, effectively a free engine change. P8 points. It's good for Checo, and it's 4 points more for Red Bull than they probably thought they might have done.
Yep, it gives them some more points in the constructors' fight, which is exactly what they need right now.
Hodders, Tyson's referred there to the curse of the second Red Bull seat. We've constantly seen, even going back to the days of Vettel and Webber, just the second driver just seems to get either no luck at all or has really bad performances.
Yeah, it seems to be a very unusual curse, considering that the second Red Bull driver has nearly always been of very high quality. I just can't put a finger on it.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. But I say, hopefully, Checo will sort things out. I say, with 9 races to go, every point will count. So although I got lucky with my choice of Verstappen for my first driver's review, the other two maybe not so much. So my second driver was Mick, not Michael Schumacher. Hey, you guys are going to take the mickey out of me.
Touche.
Yeah, Schumacher qualified 19th ahead of his teammate. Started 17th with all the grid penalties applied. Unfortunately, broke rule number 1 in that he collided with Mazapin at the end of the first lap, damaging his front wing, needing an early stop, and just cruise round to finish 18th and last. Tyson, I'll come to you first. We've said it repeatedly. Haas are just not developing their car this year. They're putting all their eggs into the 2022 basket.
Yeah, and I think at this point it just makes sense for them. The new regulations coming in, maybe they'll have a better shot at doing better next year. The car's just not going anywhere this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hodders, although I think from watching the video, it's a bit of an accidental collision between the two Haas drivers. Schumacher this season has definitely been the better of the two Haas drivers.
That one, I mean, they are both rookies in the Formula One realm, but almost constantly it does seem like Mick Schumacher is the one that is the superior driver at the moment.
Absolutely, and hopefully, the gap will the gaps will sort of close up, and hopefully the two drivers will be at Haas for next season. Hodders, your second driver was Charles Leclerc. Tell us about his race.
Yeah, it was a decent weekend for our Monegasque driver. He was third in the practices over the start of the weekend. Qualified in 5th place on the grid, which is great for Ferrari as they start to pull themselves back up this season. A mere 100th of a second ahead of his teammate Carlos Sainz. When it came to the race itself, he started in 5th and he stayed there, albeit a lap behind the top 3, but 5th, a very respectable finish.
Indeed so. And Tyson, heading into the Italian Grand Prix weekend, this is good, positive momentum for Leclerc.
It is. Leclerc and likewise Sainz, they're just having a very good, solid season, especially competing against the McLarens. And I think, in Italy this weekend, they're going to get that little extra boost that they need.
Hopefully so. Tyson, your second choice that you had was Giovinazzi. A little bit of a groan when you did pick him out, but my goodness me, didn't Antonio have a great weekend?
Yeah, he had a really interesting weekend. 8th and 9th in free practice 1 and 2, and then managed to qualify 7th ahead of Alpine and Daniel Ricciardo. And then the race, he finished 14th. It very much feels like he's driving for his F1 future right now. He had that slight contact with Alonso at lap 1. He just seemed to go backwards from there. And I think Alpha may have been disappointed. They thought points might have been within reach this weekend.
Yeah, very unlucky. And I think also later on, Giovinazzi also had a puncture, which basically obviously would have thrown him down the standings. And just 2 seats left to fill for next year's World Championship, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later on. Hodders, I think this is a very good point. Giovinazzi has been in F1 for a considerable time. He is very clearly fighting for his seat. Does he deserve to be in F1 next season?
It is a tricky one, really, particularly when his seat it is a difficult one. His seat hasn't yet been confirmed at Alfa Romeo. It's a tricky one. He should be performing better, and I don't think he knows that than being in the middle of the pack. Although I would like to think that this race weekend, at least in terms of the practices and qualifiers, show he's not been written off yet, or not to be written off yet.
Well, let's hope so, because I think Giovinazzi, I think he's a driver that if the car is working well, he's on form, they can bring home a good haul of points. But as I say, we've got young drivers coming up the ranks, so he needs to be earning his spot. And finally, for me, my third driver I was keeping a watching eye on was Nikita Mazapin. Qualified 20th, started 18th after grid penalty applied, retired on lap 42 with a hydraulic problem. So Tyson, I'll come to you on this one firstly. For all the laughs and jokes that Mazepin, or Mazepin as he was being branded at the start of the season, was getting, he's settling down. He's quiet. He's still not beating his teammates, but he's settling down.
Yeah, he's keeping his head down. He's getting the job done. I mean, we did think at the start this guy's going to be a problem when he came in, but no, he's just out there doing what he can in the house. And yeah, maybe we'll see a little bit more next year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hodders, it may well be that actually we see the true pace of both Mazepin and Schumacher next year when Haas obviously unveil their 2022 car.
I think so. I mean, I think this year they're just going to be back of the grid, and that's just the way it is. They're not developing the car, and that is that. Hopefully, with the new regulations coming in next year, we will see a more competitive Haas car.
Let us hope so. And Hodders, your third pick was Lance Stroll.
Yes, the Canadian driver had I think it's safe to say his weekend was relatively quiet. He was middle of the pack in practice. When it came to qualifying, he qualified in position number 12 on the grid, had a relatively uneventful race, started in 12th and finished there.
And Tyson, Stroll is not yet confirmed on the grid for next season. Although his father is the owner of Aston Martin Racing, should Stroll be on the grid next year?
I think he has shown that he can have a good drive here and there, just when he's motivated. He can get the job done. He's not primarily there just, for the money or because his dad owns the team. He can put a good result in every now and again.
He obviously needs to be putting more of them in, though.
Agreed.
Yes, his dad owns the team, but ultimately, it's the results that will count, especially as we have got the drivers who are aforementioned in Formula 2 and Formula 3 and the W Series coming through as well. Lastly, Tyson, with you, we were hoping to hear about Kimi Raikkonen, but unfortunately there was a change in circumstances there. Tell us more.
Wow, so Kimi Raikkonen, he tested positive for COVID on the Friday, so it meant on the Saturday he was replaced by Robert Kubica. Free practice 3, finished 19th, qualified 18th, and finished 15th. And yeah, considering that Kubica last minute just came into the car on the Saturday, I think he did really well considering the circumstances.
Yeah, he did all right. Obviously, he had basically, I think, an hour's practice time on the on the Saturday just to get used to the new circuit. So not too bad. Finishing 15th, he'll be happy with that. Unfortunately, Kimi has tested. He's still continuing to isolate, so he won't be at Monza this weekend. This may sort of help both Alfa Romeo and Kubica.
I think it was absolute fair play to Robert Kubica for stepping in on the Saturday morning, only getting a practice session before the real thing with quali and the actual race. But I think it'll be very interesting to see how he performs this weekend, particularly with sprint qualifying as well.
Yes, we have the sprint qualifying back this weekend for Monza, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. Right, so there were the 9 drivers we were keeping our eye on. What were your thoughts? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Who is your driver of choice? Let us know in the comments section below. But obviously, do that after you like and subscribe. Those are the 2 important buttons to click first. So, moving on to our winners and spinners. And for me, the winner of the weekend for me was Antonio Giovinazzi. An exceptional qualifying performance, putting all the way up into 7th place. Unfortunately, as we've alluded to earlier, his race was undone by early contact with Fernando Alonso and then completely destroyed by a puncture. For me, my spinner of the weekend, I never thought I'd be saying this. Lando Norris, a surprisingly poor qualifying performance. He started P13, and it also meant that his race was compromised. I think just finishing inside the points. Tyson, Lando has been a very consistent qualifier and finisher, not just this season but throughout his F1 career. So this was a shock performance.
Yeah, I think he was just really unlucky in qualifying. He didn't get a good bunker lap in, and it just cost him when it came down to the second qualifying session.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hodders, I think what wasn't helped is obviously we had the 2 red flags in qualifying 2, which basically just meant Lando was just completely destroyed in terms of strategy for qualifying.
Exactly. Those red flags came at really poor times. I think they affected quite a few drivers, but Norris even more so, and therefore missed Q3, which is going to be a real disappointment in his mind, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Hodders, who are your winners and spinners this weekend?
Well, I did think for a while about the winner, and in the absence of thinking of anybody else, I went for the young Frenchman Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. He very much impressed me over the weekend. He was strong during the practice, qualified 4th, and stayed there throughout the race. And a very, very fine performance for a driver who doesn't always have those high up performances. When he does, they're quite special.
Yeah, absolutely. Pierre is one of those drivers. He'll consistently get in the top 10, and he'll consistently get the little handfuls of points every now and then. But just on rare occasions, the car, the driver, the circuit, it all comes together, and Gasly is just brilliant. And obviously, a year ago, Gasly obviously won his first Grand Prix at Monza, so he'll be hoping that that will inspire him to hopefully a very good result this weekend. So that was obviously your winners, Hodders. Your spinner, ouch.
Well, despite him finishing second, my spinner, for reasons nothing to do with the racing itself, is Sir Lewis Hamilton. Loath as I am to say it, and I might get pelters for it, but his real spinning wasn't so much the wheels as his mouth over the whole race. He spent most of the race complaining or airing his grievances on radio, which wasn't a pleasant listen.
Yeah, it's understandable, but there are times when it's just like, be quiet. Things aren't going to happen for you. Just get your head down and get on with the race. Tyson, we're used to Hamilton complaining about this, Tyson, but this was just a whole nother level.
Yeah, it does seem to be when Lewis is in a bad situation in the race, they play a lot more radio of him complaining.
Yep. And it might just be that that's the good old Dutch TV producers, especially some with their Verstappen caps on. But no, that's been a bit too harsh. Yeah, and we know that Hamilton does complain when things just aren't working for him. But I guess that's the mentality of a 7 times world champion. Tyson, I'm going to come on to your winner in a minute, but I think for the first time ever in the history of the Double Wave Yellows podcast,
we've had a disagreement.
We've got a disagreement on our winners and spinners. Tyson?
So I think me and Matt may have a little different criteria how we judge this, but I've got Giovinazzi as my spinner. So he did have the good practice sessions, yes. He did have the good qualifying sessions, yes. But then he just didn't convert it in the race. He lost, 7 or 8 places total? And yeah, as I said earlier, I think Alpha would have been hoping for a lot more considering how good things were looking.
Not good. Right, so Tyson, you're getting sacked from the podcast. No. To be fair, I completely understand, Tyson. Yeah, the practice and the qualifying, it's all very well if you can get high up the grid, but Belgium 2021 accepted, points aren't handed out for qualifying.
No,
They're handed out on race day. Absolutely, you've got to get it done the race. Giovinazzi didn't, although I think for him it was just bad luck. He was clipped by Fernando in the first lap, shuffled down the order, and obviously then the puncture put paid to everything. But never mind. But I think your winner, I don't think anybody can disagree with, car 33, the one that pretty much everybody at Zandvoort was cheering for.
Yeah, and it seems like the boring safe pick to go for the winner of the race, but my reasoning is it was a real chess battle, this race. Mercedes threw everything at Max, all the different strategies, all the different plays. He and Red Bull, they just countered them at every turn. Just incredible.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. And Hodders, it wasn't just the race performance and the race strategy. Red Bull and Max were on it from practice 1, lap 1.
Absolutely, as I said before when we were talking about Max, is that Red Bull did not put a foot, wheel, or hand, or even eye wrong throughout the whole weekend. I mean, absolute fair play to Perez for parlaying from pit lane to P8, which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And it would have been interesting to see, could we have had a Red Bull 1-2 had Perez been further up the grid? We will never know. Okay. So looking at our talking points, no real major incidents during the race weekend, but I think there's a lot of positives to take from the Dutch Grand Prix. Hottest, most of all, was the carnival atmosphere that we saw throughout the race weekend.
We really did. I mean, you had the Iranian army out there with the flares, the noise, and everything else. And it was a great place to be as well. One thing that is worth noting is something we'll come to later on, so I won't spoil it now, but the fact that it was just such a positive vibe there.
Mm-hmm.
And the weather was perfect for it too.
Oh, the weather was just beautiful. It was the complete opposite to what we had a week earlier in Spa. And I think also, and this is credit to the Dutch fans, apart from one or two individuals in qualifying, they gave full respect and praise to Lewis Hamilton. Whenever he was shown on the big screens, whenever he was being interviewed in Parc Fermé, they were applauding, very respectful. So credit to those at Zandvoort for that. Tyson, the circuit, it looked spectacular, and obviously you've driven on it on the Formula One game. A roller coaster circuit, but not much for overtaking.
Yeah, it's surprising. It seems like a difficult track to overtake on. There doesn't seem to be a lot of spaces where you can really make those moves. And I think one of the aspects of the game is just where you can open the DRS. Obviously, that would be very difficult in real life on the banking.
Yeah. And on Hodders, we were saying, I mean, it's not like it's Monaco or Singapore, but if you want to overtake at this circuit, you've just got to absolutely throw it down into the corner, and you've got to have the cooperation of the driver, because otherwise it's not working.
You absolutely do, and obviously I wasn't able to watch the race, but I was listening via radio, via the good old BBC. Others are available, and they were mentioning on the radio broadcast at the time that they said that the overtake threshold was somewhere in the region of 2.1 seconds. So you had to be 2 seconds faster than the driver in front, not too dissimilar to Hungary, which shows how much you really have to push hard on that to have any chance of overtaking.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, but by no means least, Lewis versus Max, round 30, and I think it's fair to say a comfortable win for Max, giving him back the lead of the championship. And Tyson, I think this is basically a damage limitation weekend for Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. As I said earlier, Red Bull, they were just on it this weekend. They couldn't put a foot wrong.
Absolutely, and Hodders, Max, just a perfect weekend, exactly what he needed. 25 points, and taking the lead, we're getting closer and closer now towards the crunch point of the championship.
It absolutely is. We're into the final third near as by now, or not far off it. And it's just one of those where it could go either way.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the championship standings, Verstappen takes the lead on 224.5 points. Lewis Hamilton 3 points behind on 221.5 points. Bottas a long way back, 123 points, now having to fend off the likes of Lando Norris on 114 and Sergio Perez on 108. The two Ferrari drivers, Leclerc and Sainz, are on 92 and 89.5 points respectively. Gasly, equally respectable, 66 points. Daniel Ricciardo on 56 and Fernando Alonso rounding out the top 10 on 46 points. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes on 344.5 points. However, they are closely being caught by Red Bull on 332.5 points, just a 12-point gap. Ferrari in third on 181.5 points after a really good weekend. McLaren off the boil somewhat, are in fourth place on 170. Alpine on 90 points. AlphaTauri close behind on 84. So again, another sort of championship battle we got going on there. Aston Martin really on their own on 53. Williams on 20 and Alfa Romeo on 3 points, leading Haas on 0. So we're going to look now at the silly season, the driver transfer market. Who it was starting to kick off around the Spa weekend. We've had a lot of driver transfers confirmed over the last few days. So we've had Valderie Bottas confirmed as going from Mercedes to Alfa Romeo. We've had probably the worst kept secret in Formula One. George Russell is finally confirmed as going to Mercedes to partner Lewis Hamilton. Gasly and Tsunoda have been re-signed at AlphaTauri for next season. Alex Albon, the Red Bull reserve driver, is going to Williams, who will be joining Nicholas Latifi there. Hodders, I'll come to you first. George Russell, we knew this was coming. What an opportunity this is going to be for George.
It really is, and I think really the announcement that we've had in the last week, I think you two will agree, was nothing more than a formality, but a very happy one nevertheless. I mean, George Russell is a very young, relatively young in the F1 world, very talented driver. He has a long and hopefully prosperous career, and I think at Mercedes he's going to do quite well. What I think may actually happen is that Hamilton and Russell might actually be allowed to race each other.
Oh, yes, please.
And that can only be a good thing.
Absolutely. And Tyson, it may well be that we're going to sort of see a handing over of the baton. We've got Lewis Hamilton. We don't know how much longer he's going to be in the sport. We've got George Russell, a driver who is clearly vastly talented, who can often outperform the car. It could well be that we're going to see Mercedes continuing to win championships after Hamilton leaves or retires.
Yeah, it's very possible that this could be a handing of the torch moment, and I am just so thrilled for Russell. He won the F2 Championship in 2018, and it's been a little frustrating just watching him around the back in that Williams, knowing that the potential's there. Now he's going to get a car that he can do something with, and yeah, I think we're going to see some good results out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And Honda's one of the Double Wave Yellow's favourite drivers, Tsunoda, re-signed alongside Pierre Gasly for next season, and well deserved.
Very much deserved. I mean, some rookie drivers have an absolute flyer, others have a disaster, others have, you could almost say, a settled season, a quiet, settled season. He's very much got the attitude and sass needed on radio when he needs to. When he needs to vent, he'll vent. But he is there to learn, and I think even before the start of the season, I thought he's going to be. I think he'll have more than one season at AlphaTauri. It's very well deserved. He's not quite there yet, but he will.
Mm-hmm. But Tyson, all the first year excuses, he won't get that next year. He will need to perform.
He will, and he's had quite a roller coaster of a season. He's had some good results, some not so good results. Next year, hopefully, he's going to get that consistency down and really start to deliver in the AlphaTauri.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't covered it to start with. Tyson, Valderie Bottas leaves Mercedes after 5 seasons. He has served Mercedes well, but the last couple of years he's just been dropping further and further back from Hamilton, and it's now getting to a point where the Constructors' Championship is at risk now.
Yeah, and I think he has put in a good shift at Mercedes. They needed a number 2 driver to complement Hamilton. He's played that role really well, and yeah, I think it's good that he's staying in Formula One in the Alfa Romeo. He may be able to do something down there. He possibly will have someone new in the seat. We don't know yet, but yeah, I think he'll do good down there.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, Hodders, Alex Albon back in Formula One after a year out at Williams with Latifi. I'm intrigued as to how that partnership will work.
I too am very intrigued as to how this partnership will work. I mean, I didn't see Albon race when he was with Red Bull, and it's good to see him get a second chance in F1. Knowing Latifi as I have this year, I think it could be a very interesting team dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they will complement each other very well. Obviously, Alex Albon brings a lot of experience from Red Bull / Toro Rosso. Equally, Nicholas Latifi, he's got a good couple of years of experience now at Williams. I don't necessarily think there will be a number 1 / number 2 driver, and hopefully we'll see Williams continuing to rise back up the championship order. Okay, so we're getting towards the end now of the podcast. So what's coming up? So this weekend we have the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and we've alluded to it earlier. Hodders, we've got another sprint qualifying this weekend.
We have indeed, and what a circuit to have a sprint on. I mean, Monza, it's fast, it's furious, it only has 11 corners, it's zippy, and I think the sprint's going to be very exciting for the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, it's being called the sprint. As Hodders said, what better place to have it than the fastest F1 circuit on the calendar?
Absolutely, and yeah, it's going to live up to the name. This will be a sprint, the fastest track on the calendar. And Silverstone showed, yeah, this is a good idea in concept. I think now we're going to see the car really go all out.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully we may have something during the sprint that sort of shakes things up and perhaps makes things interesting for the race on Sunday. Don't forget, you can catch us next Thursday when we do the Italian Grand Prix podcast. We'll obviously be reviewing the F1 race. We'll review the sprint. So, yeah, fingers crossed we have some good stuff to talk about there. So lastly, our final thoughts. We obviously talked about the carnival atmosphere that we saw at Zandvoort. Hodders, something you talked about throughout the weekend, and it was great to see the green credentials of Zandvoort.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the real advantage of the Netherlands in general, actually, and definitely for Zandvoort and say, is that one advantage you do have with a circuit like Zandvoort, yes, it's on the coast, but it's very, very easy to get to. I mean, for those who don't know, Zandvoort does have a railway station. It has a railway terminus that they actually expanded in the light of the GP coming. But the fact of the matter is, you can get a train every 6 minutes from Amsterdam Centraal and be at Zandvoort within half an hour, which goes to show what good public transport infrastructure can do, particularly as racing is trying to get more green. One little factoid that I picked up on from the television broadcast was fewer than 2%. This is true. Less than 2% of spectators went by car. Otherwise, they went by sustainable public transport, and that's highly commendable.
Absolutely, it's good to see having a positive impact on the environment. So well done to everyone at Zandvoort, and hopefully this is something that we will see other Formula One circuits trying to build in future. Right. Well, that's it from us. My thanks, as always, to Hodders and to Tyson for your input. Looking forward to this weekend.
Oh, absolutely.
You bet you.
Great stuff. We'll talk about it all, obviously, next week. Lastly, and as always, my thanks to you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to leave us a comment. We want to hear what your thoughts are. Be good, and if you can't be good, be safe. For Matt, for myself, Matt, and everyone else, take care. See you all soon.